Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Program Director for Communication, Media, and Ethics here at Mid-America Christian University. And I am here with our COM 4413 Communication and Cultural Change Week 4 video prompt. Week 4, we are continuing along the path of Jason Mittell's Complex TV, the poetics of contemporary television storytelling. And this week we jump ahead to chapter 7. We're looking at the serialized melodrama. We are ideally screening some serialized melodrama pilots from the dawn of the current era of what has been called either peak TV or prestige television, sort of a time of experimental new form storytelling that has some unique departures from traditional episodic television. Sometimes these texts retain parts of that traditional formula. Most television shows retain some DNA of traditional broadcasting norms or storytelling or narrative norms, but we're beginning to see in this timeline, in this chronology of television history, new ways of telling stories, longer ways of telling stories, deeper emotional ways to approach things, and the emergence of certain types of genre mixing when it comes to established formulas, conventions, and tropes that would be familiar with TV audiences. So just as we've been reading about these transitions in television history through television and American culture, we're also looking at the evolution of narrative form in television with the Complex TV book. So I'm going to draw a little bit out of chapter 7 in the serial melodrama, and just going to provide some content recap here that will prime where we want to go with our week 4 discussion. And so this week, it's a very focused discussion prompt, but yet we are wanting to pull a little bit more out of our responses, all right? We want to get to a deeper level of description of the text and of the experience. We're going to request that you sort of seek out and search for in the text. So anyway, let me get to the book here, a little bit of concrete content. So when talking about the serial melodrama, Mittell starts, it's appropriate to back up, look at the history of the soap opera, even the radio serial, and see how those have influenced and impacted certain types of norms that were then brought up into the prime time, right, or evening schedules. He talks about the temporal conditions. There's some comparison contrast between the production schedule for a daytime soap opera, much heavier, many more episodes, many more hours, a need to stretch out the serialized storytelling form versus tighter production schedules on first the broadcast networks, but even smaller episode seasons for cable television programming, pay cable, and now, of course, with so many streaming services, the original content they produce is also often of a shorter episode order. All right, so this maximizes a lot of creative control and experimentation, and it gains a quality control. So there's a trade-off between quality versus quantity. And so looking at that and thinking about what it meant, what the history of the soap opera means, Mittell writes that expanding our understanding of the melodrama into a more pervasive mode instead of a narrower genre has at least 2 major impacts on our understanding of contemporary television seriality, on page 245. First, it disrupts the dichotomy that has been posited for decades, pitting the quote, primetime soap, end quote, marked by stylistic excess and trashy sensibilities, think Dallas Dynasty, some of these options, maybe in the heyday of the 80s, against the quality drama, heralded as serious, socially engaged, and more aesthetically mature than its lowbrow competition. So when we're looking at our screenings for week 4, the possible options we have, and really this continues in week 5, these are selective, right? These samplings come from this culturally agreed upon category of perhaps what is now referred to as a more quality controlled program, something that's taking some risk but also has agreed upon high aesthetic value, right? It's doing something different. In any event, Mattel goes over this comparison and contrast once again, and that's part of him demonstrating evaluative criticism, but he goes over what is traditionally viewed as masculine traits versus feminine traits, at least how they're coded culturally and thus coded within television programs. And so we get some examples of that, but he also goes on to suggest these are outdated terms, right? So thinking about soap operas as a kind of weepy program, right? Something that you can, to quote Warhol in here, have a good cry with. But we're going to hang on to that idea because it's important in the era of quality TV and emotional investment in these texts. It similarly talks about traditionally masculine coded terms such as puzzle solving, the completion of the solving of riddles, investigation, and this has less to do with sort of man-woman viewer distinction and more to do with kind of Western understandings of binary opposition between thinking and feeling, right? So in many Western philosophical and social cognitive epistemologies dating back to the Enlightenment era and beyond, but we're really kind of fashioning these things out, coming out of those types of thinkers and modalities of thinking, right, philosophical, intellectual. These practices are associated roughly with masculine quality versus feeling, right, sort of affect, emotion is tethered to, it's culturally coded as feminine, right? So you have thinking and feeling on this oppositional spectrum. And we just use the spectrum to then kind of create things, create ways of reading, assessing, quantifying data about humans. Anyway, so he's bringing attention to the idea that genres of TV storytelling play with these tensions, all right? And so the soap opera traditionally formatted at a time, at a place, and a certain point in history for a female viewer to maximize interest for them versus other types of programs that were specifically produced with head of the household or a sort of like the man of the house, right? I'm using these kinds of like old-fashioned traditional cultural terms, but programs that would speak to them in a certain way. And so Mattel wants to argue that we've collapsed these, and that's part of the excitement of the quality TV age, right? Of this new golden age, of this age of prestige programming. Or rather, let me stick to quality TV because he does make a minor case that prestige program is not the same as complex TV, okay? So, specifying where we want to explore with this, I'm going to read another excerpt here. No, let's jump ahead. Okay, so anyway, he rejects Newman and Levine's claim that, quote, contemporary serials masculinize the soap opera form, but rather invert their claim and suggests that the pervasive spread of serial Melodrama has added an effeminate layer to traditionally masculinist genres such as the crime genre, the crime drama, espionage thrillers, and science fiction. So we're talking about genre mixing and gender blending, right? In terms of thinking of those things just like genre conventions and the formulas that we use to identify certain types of popular culture or entertainment that we consume, right? Mediums and media. So back to our prompt, thinking about these types of the emotional complexity of the serialized melodrama. I want you to think about, brainstorm, and be willing and open to share a text and specific experience where a televisual text had a strong emotional impact on you. Now, if it reaches the level of a, quote, feel-good cry, like Warhol is quoted in Complex TV as saying, so be it. If you're willing to share that information with us, recount that story, by all means, do so. We want to hear about it. Think of a peak time you were emotionally engaged with the TV text. And don't just describe it in broad terms, right? Don't give us the broad strokes. So this is where that brings, think about it, process it a little bit. What was the text? What was that specific episode about? And if it's some extreme spoiler alert, right? If some kind of series finale of some sort, by all means, preface that. Give us a spoiler alert, give the classmates a chance to mute or something like that, or maybe go hurry and binge watch 7 seasons of something and then come back and listen to the rest of your tale of emotional connection. But we want to hear about an emotional experience you had while engaging in text. And while ideally we are shooting for a serialized form of complex TV, it is my understanding, it's a broad assumption, we can have an emotional connection and experience with any form of media or television. But we are talking about television, we're studying television in this course, so perhaps it could be a sports event, that a deep level of fan engagement, right? The fandom, the team finally wins, right? The Boston Red Sox, they finally win the World Series, or the Cubs after 100 and whatever years. These types of events, media events, TV events, evoke real emotion, okay? The sort of certain presidential elections, right? All kinds of these results, they capitalize on the human condition, right? And our emotional response to things, and they can spotlight that and touch us in deep and meaningful ways. So think about that. Think about, but particularly dramas or perhaps comedies, but complex television show, and the way in which it enacted elicited an emotional response from you. Describe that for us in rich detail, don't give us the broad strokes, give us some details. Think about how you want to fashion this into a strong storytelling form about your own an emotional experience you had with a TV text. And if not, then work hard to seek and come up with an alternative that's along those same lines. But dig deeper back into the subconscious, right? Is there something we've forgotten about from a different age? All right, so I look forward to these responses. Week 4 of our video discussion prompt, Communication 4413, Communication and Cultural Change. Thank you.